of the Supreme Court to modernize the practice in these courts, all this in partial fulfillment of our Plan Belize promise to deliver affordable access and speedier trials and restoring the independence of the judiciary. You will never hear me, Madam Speaker, criticize any judge of the Supreme Court. During the budget debate, my colleagues will expand on this list of accomplishments that were made in 2021. Madam Speaker, Belize is a small, open, and therefore fragile economy. So many of the factors that determine our fiscal fortunes are beyond our control. These factors include inflation, interest rates, the cost of fuel and energy, climate change, the terms of trade and commerce, just to mention a few. In assembling the budget for fiscal year 2022-23, not only have these factors weighed heavily upon our considerations, but another concern stood foremost in our collective thinking: the fragility of economic and fiscal recovery from devastating effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. From both a revenue and spending standpoint, government must be cautious. Therefore, there is no new major tax revenue measures in this budget. Yes, we will seek to close certain tax loopholes to adjust collections for activities such as in the lottery sector. The lottery sector. We have to tax that. They're not only fairly contributing and to aggressively enforce the current revenue mandate. On the spending side, the new budget restores the wage levels for fiscal year 2020-2021 to public officers and teachers, maintains even other current spending lines, and reprioritizes capital investments to align with several major social justice goals of the Plan Belize blueprint. Recurrent revenues are projected at $1.12 billion, which is 7.5%, or $86 million higher than the forecasted outturn for this fiscal year. Both tax and non-tax revenues are projected to rise, while capital revenues will remain constant and grants will fall to $35 million, in line with our bilateral agreements. Revenue growth is consistent with a 6.5% overall GDP growth forecast of the IMF for 2022, and the central bank's slightly more modest 6% growth forecast. On the expenditure side, overall spending will rise compared to this year's projected outturn by $144 million, or 12%. These increases include the following major spending lines. Wages and pensions will rise by a combined 10%, or some $49 million. Most of this attributable to the 10% wage restoration, which is to commence on July 1st. Subsidies and transfers will rise by $37 million, or 25%, which is mostly indirect wage subsidies linked to the wage restoration. Debt service will rise by $24 million as we commence interest payments on the blue bonds. Capital spending will rise by $30 million compared to this year's outturn of $243 million. I will address in more detail the issues of wage, pensions, and capital spending priorities. In summary, therefore, the new budget targets a primary surplus of some $14 million, or 0.35% of GDP, along with an overall deficit of $98.1 million, or 2.49% of GDP. Government proposes to retire $97.4 million in public debt during this budget cycle. Total financing required for this budget year will be $195.6 million to be sourced from the following lenders: $84 million from Taiwan, with a portion of the $150 million loan in pursuance of our MOU with them, and $98 million disbursements from international financial institutions in support of our Capital II program, and $13 million from the domestic system financed through new issue of government treasury securities. Outside these academic numbers, which must be recited for consistency, I punctuate with just a few examples what this budget does for all Belizeans. 1, it employs 15,000 public officers and teachers who collectively provide 35.1 million work hours of public service during the budget period. 2, the budget underwrites national sovereignty and citizen security through the roles of the Belize Defense Force, the Belize Police Department, and the Coast Guard. 3, the budget funds the functioning of the judiciary, thereby providing the mechanism for law and order in our country. 4, the budget pays for 181 government schools, contributes to another 381 grant-aided schools, supports some level of direct support scholarship funding for 4,000 students at the tertiary level, and effectively bankrolls the national education system from kinder to UB for 102,679 students. And this budget will provide an additional $2 million for youth and sporting programs. Five, our National Referral Hospital, regional hospitals and clinics, and the entire public health system is subsidized by this budget. 6, the budget funds the national infrastructure system, maintaining 527 miles of paved roads, 2,249 miles of gravel surface roads, 300 bridges, not to mention the entirety of new infrastructure projects. 7, rural development, the land registry and land surveys, the provision of passports, the facilitation of trade and investments, the regulation of every sector, from tourism to aviation to agriculture, is to some degree subsidized by the national budget. Whether you live, go to work, or go to school or work in any of our 2 cities, 7 towns, or almost 200 villages, this budget touches your life positively in some way or another. What distinguishes this new budget and the current one is the extent to which my administration strives to collect the people's revenues, strives to secure value for money in spending, and strives to ensure that in the main, the people's budget is an instrument of equitable national development and prosperity. Madam Speaker, to address our principal priorities, I wish to outline just a few of the pertinent capital spending targets that will be enabled by this budget. First, with those that are funded from external loan and grant resources, the so-called Capital III program. $4 million for continuation of the strengthening of tax administration and for the full rollout of the IRIS, Integrated Revenue Information System, a multi-year program supported by the IDB. $1 million for for the strengthening of public expenditure management, also supported by the IDB. $13.5 million to the education sector to improve access, equity, and quality in our all-important education system, supported jointly by the IDB and CDB. $2 million of additional funds for the COVID-19 response, for purchase and administration of the vaccine program, this supported by the World Bank. $1.5 million for the new climate resilient and sustainable agriculture program. To be funded, it's a CERSAC, right? To be funded by the World Bank. $3.5 million for the institutional strengthening and capacity building in our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Foreign Trade and Immigration. This support provided by the government of the Republic of China on Taiwan. $1.5 billion for sustainable tourism to fortify this anchor industry, supported by the IDB. Madam Speaker, in accordance with Standing Order 12.8, I move that the proceedings on the order paper may be entered upon and proceeded with at this day's sitting at any word do oppose.
That the proceedings on the order paper may be entered upon and proceeded with at this day's sitting at any hour though opposed. All those in favor kindly say aye. Aye. Those against kindly say no.
$68 million in aggregate for the transformative road infrastructure program, including continued work on the upgrading of the Coastal Road, the Caracal Road, the George Rice Highway, the Philip Colston Highway, and for a new Halover Bridge, just to name a few of the main infrastructure projects currently underway. $8 million for the Integral Security Program funded by CABE, to include new police stations for the twin towns of San Ignacio Santa Elena and for Kikoka, a new dormitory at the Price Barracks, a crime reduction state-of-the-art surveillance system in Belize City, new office, transport and communications equipment for the police and the BDF, a new deep water vessel for the Coast Guard, and a new medical center at Fairweather Camp in Punta Gorda. $3 million for the Resilient Rural Belize program funded by IFAD to support our agricultural sector through development of climate-smart agriculture and rural infrastructure. But the list does not end there, Madam Speaker. On the Capital 2 program, that is the local capital programs which are funded from our own resources, we are making the following investment provisions. A $1.5 million to commence work on the electoral redistricting program. $6 million for the continuation of the constituency development program, which touches all 31 constituencies. $9.2 million to meet our conservation funding commitments under the Blue Bond Debt for Marine Protection Swap Program, of which 40% should flow to public sector agencies involved in marine conservation programs. $7 million for COVID-19 response, if this is required. $1 million for survey and mapping of 8,000 new lots to be distributed this year, and a further $12 million under the Land Development Land Acquisition Program. Still the UDP debts, Deputy Prime Minister. $6 million on the social assistance to provide food support for the most vulnerable groups in our population. $24.2 million for maintenance of highways, streets, and drains, rural roads, and feeder roads. $5 million for the purchase of heavy-duty equipment and vehicles for the Ministry of Infrastructure Development, as this ministry builds its own in-house road construction and rehabilitation unit. Could you believe the hundreds of millions of dollars Ministry of Works spent under the UDP? They have no equipment. They hire a lot of people, you know. And they sit down there at the compound with nothing to do because they have no equipment. And the limit of the equipment that they had was working at a private farm. A private farm where we can't find the person right now. We can't find the person. Maybe you could help me, leader of the opposition. $14.8 million for local counterpart contributions to some of the major road rehabilitation projects funded by foreign sources, including the Caracol Road, the Coastal Road, and the Halover Bridge. $5 million for low-income housing assistance. This year, government also proposes to commence implementation of the long overdue expansion of the National Health Insurance Program, the NHI. Healthcare, which is a basic right of every citizen. Healthcare, especially community-based preventative and primary care, is the backbone of a vibrant, industrious, and healthy population. NHI is the brainchild of the last PUP administration, and we must give credit to the former Prime Minister, Said Musa, whose birthday is going to be on Saturday, right? And we have one party for judge. Happy birthday in advance, Prime Minister Musa.